Hi, everybody. This is I can't even remember what we called this panel. Digital gaming.
D&D, digital gaming,
You're right.
D&D. I don't know.
So
you wrote it up.
So my name is John File, and I am a senior producer at Wizards of the Coast. My primary job is to handle the relationships between Wizards of the Coast and our external developers that make video games like Cryptic and Turbine and Atari, things like that. I've been in the video game industry for over a decade. I started off at LucasArts, did the Star Wars thing for a while, went on to Microsoft and a couple of other places, and finally landed at Wizards of the Coast, which means that my 17-year-old self back in high school is looking on at me with incredible envy, because you know, that was what I wanted to do when I was 17, was work at TSR. So everything is really, really cool for me. This lecture is mostly about how we turn our 2D paper and pencil video game RPG into video games and the difficulties they're in, because it's really two different types of mediums with two different types of demands. And so many times, I don't know if you guys were like me back in high school or early college, and you'd be playing your video game. We were really heavy into Rollmaster back in college. We go, oh, wouldn't this be so much better on computer? Because, you know, Rollmaster has, what, 4,000 pages of charts? You guys all played Rollmaster, right? Yeah, this is a big Rollmaster fan area here. And so what we didn't know then is all the difficulties that it takes to make a fun, engaging experience from the pen and paper experience to the video game experience. So without further ado, let's introduce our panelists. So first we have John Chindeheady. John Chindeheady.
Yay.
Introduce yourself, John.
Hi, I'm John Chindeheady, and I am the Senior Creative Director with Wizards of the Coast, and I specifically work on Dungeons & Dragons. My passion, my love. I've been there playing D&D since 1975, so as you can guess, I like the game. I came out to D&D, well, I came into Wizards of the Coast. I was headhunted by them in 1997. I actually started working at Wizards the same day all the guys from TSR started, so we all went through orientation together, and it was instantly assumed that I came from TSR, even though I didn't. But it was great fun because I got to sit in orientation with all my greatest loves, sitting next to Brom, sitting next to Todd Lockwood, sitting next to Jeff Easley, and just kind of going, It was amazing to me that, you know, years later we actually all worked together on the team for D&D, and I've just loved it ever since then. And so I have a great time, I have a great job. My job pretty much entails, if it's got the D&D logo on it and it's got visuals attached to it, I'm responsible for making sure it hits the mark. And if it doesn't hit the mark, I get hit by my fans, and I get hit by my boss, and I get hit by anybody else who happens to walk by me. And so that's all good. That's why I have a cane now, to protect myself. This is going to be kind of a free-ranging conversation. We're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to chat for a little while. Hopefully Jack Emmert will show up in a little bit, and he's going to be showing us some fun stuff at about 11. And we're going to have lots of questions and answers and just kind of chat for a little bit. So feel free to jump in.
All right, Eric.
All right, my name is Eric Boyer. My Twitter and forum account is Producer Glenn. It was something that was dubbed to me through podcasts on DDO that started about 5 years ago. And so I've got a reputation as Producer Glenn, who's the snarkier side of myself. And I've been at Turbine WB Games since Mod 1 of DDO. I actually started playing and interviewing to work at Turbine during the DDO beta, and took about 3 months to land the job there. I was a game producer for casual games prior to that, and children's education games going back earlier in my career. And so I got into my first AAA title through Turbine on DDO, and I actually took DDO to Asia and Europe as my first assignment, managing that process.
And I'm sure everybody knows DDO is Dungeons & Dragons Online, just to be sure.
So, yeah, and we didn't start out as just Dungeons & Dragons Online. We were Dungeons & Dragons Online Stormreach. We were early adopters of the Eberron campaign and promoting that, and we've been going strong with that for about 6 years. Since then, I've taken on the role of senior producer, managing the team. We've got a dedicated development team of starting with like 10 world builders, several systems developers for our plethora of MMO-based systems, and which we keep adding to, and a strong engineering team, and that doesn't include all the supporting things that go with publishing a digital game that's live and constantly being updated in a modular fashion. So that's what my hands are full of, including the fun part of being a producer as opposed to the project manager is you actually have creative input, so you get to really brainstorm what's the story, where are we going with it, what's the future of it, how do we keep people interested now and continue to reach our goals that are more long-term. So those are the things I'm tasked with in that environment.
Cool. Let's get this party started. So, John, tell me about the best D&D experience you've had.
The best D&D experience? Wow,
Yeah.
that's such a wide-ranging thing.
Yeah.
The best
I wanted to
D&D
narrow it.
experience. You talking work-related or play-related?
Oh, play-related.
Play-related.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Best D&D experience I ever had was I was in high school. It was when I was first starting to play in D&D. We had a guy named Steve Archodi. Got me into D&D. It was awesome. It was fun. He convinced me to be a magic user. I don't like being magic users, I found out. I despise being a magic user because 5 minutes the game started, we got into a battle, somebody chopped my hands off, I was worthless as a magic user, and they threw me off a castle wall. I have never played a magic user ever since.
I can see why this is the height of your D&D.
But I had a lot of
experience.
fun. The thing I learned was that it was a great game to play. It was a lot of fun, and it totally sucked me in. And even though I had a miserable experience, I learned the great thing about D&D. The fact that it was wonderful is that if I didn't like who I was, I could change it that fast. And that was the wonderful thing I learned about it. And that was the great experience. That from that day forward, I learned that whatever I didn't like, I got to change and be and do and what. And so that's what made D&D the greatest experience. And so that's what I've always tried to make sure that as I worked in the industry was that understanding that the D&D experience is about what we make it. And if I try and narrow that down so I can't have that exploration part of it, you lose it. So that's why it's really the most important thing for me.
Awesome. So that's a really good example. Let's break that down and try to make it into a digital experience.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. So so you're a magic user, right?
I am.
All right. So the first thing is yeah, in the first 5 minutes you lose your hands. So Eric, tell me what you would have to do in a video game in order to be able to replicate this experience.
To replicate the experience, first we'd need a mechanic to not make you angry about your experience. There's a saying that video games don't cause violence, but bad video games make people violent. And so it doesn't matter what the genre actually is. If you have a poor experience, you actually get really angry. So that's actually one of the things that you don't have your friend there to console you and say that's okay. We'll re-roll you or something. You have to actually offer that in a mechanic that people understand. So so it's not exactly what's the gameplay experience so much as what do we do to make you feel better about your bad experience.
Right. So mechanically, though, the first thing that you would need to be able to replicate this experience is a model of a magic user with disposable hands, right?
If you could lose your hands in combat, you would need to be able to represent that digitally.
Right. So at one point I was working at Snowblind Entertainment. They did games like the Dark Alliance D&D games on the PlayStation. And we were on this new generation game that never got shipped. And one of the things that they were promising was everything had to fall off. Basically, you could lop off arms, lop off legs, lop off heads.
What was the Monty Python?
It was very interesting. One of the programmers thought he was being clever, and he invented a sword that hit all those spots all at one time. So you hit a critter with one blow of the sword, and all of the limbs and head flew off in one big spurt of incredible blood and hands. And So the problem with that was suddenly instead of having one entity, one guy, one model, suddenly there is 7. And if you're in a mob of like orcs and you are slapping these things one at a time, suddenly 10 orcs become 70 pieces of orcs, right? And so that means 70 things on your screen. That means that your lag is just getting worse and worse and worse as things fly through the air. And then you have the particle effects of blood, right? You have to consider all that great stuff. So replicating an experience like being able to chop off the hands of a magic user in a video game suddenly becomes a very big exercise in trying to mitigate all those types of things. So when you try to go from the world of imagination to the world of video games, you suddenly find yourself in a box of lag, a box of number of assets that you can fit on a screen, the number of mechanics that you want to have. Everything is based on time and on burn rate. So things can get kind of rough. Eric, you've played D&D before, right? Yeah. Okay, can you tell us what your best D&D experience is?
You know, I always attribute it back to my Advanced Dungeons and Dragons experience, where I would watch over my brother's shoulder when he played, and if he caught me, he'd hit me. The reason that's a good experience is one way to make people, you know, motivate to want to do something is not let them do it. You just get more of a drive to do that. So I'd say that was actually, you know, my early introductions is just wanting to be like my older brother and emulate that experience and get into that cool, like, yeah, come on, a 7-year-old being able to do these things. I have a better imagination than a 13-year-old. Come on.
Of course, yeah, 7-year-old.
So, you know, understanding the mechanics wasn't even important. It was pretending you were doing something awesome that made that cool.
Right.
So, you know, later on, you know, things changed, experience changed in my life, and I moved into video games and I've sort of gotten away from that. But being able to digitally relive those moments, and there's a big gap, which is part of what we're talking about, you know, and what that experience is between imagining it and have somebody try to convey it digitally.
Right. So your best experience in D&D wasn't actually playing D&D, it was being hit by your brother while watching D&D?
It was that life-changing moment.
Okay.
I'm seeing an interesting, you know, mix of stuff here with lots of negative experiences about great times in D&D. What's that about?
Yeah, well, it leads to that chance of you know, being able to have that alternate life and play out something and sort of escape reality a little bit. And that's what makes that good.
Cool. Let's keep going into art. So, John, part of your job now is to make sure that our pen and paper RPG is faithfully reproduced in the digital formats. So, when you commission a piece of 2D art, are you considering the ramifications of making that into a 3D piece of art?
So yes and no, and because I'm going to segue back for a second. When you say faithful reproduction, I actually don't try and create a faithful reproduction of the paper and pen game for the video games. And this is why, because different mediums require different user experiences. You know, so the idea of what I've tried to create for the pen and paper-based games is often very different than what I want to try and create for a video game versus a Facebook game versus a, you know, an IO game or whatever, because different user experiences, different user interfaces, different modes of playing, different, you know, those really all affect that. And so when we're trying to, you know, and even different attitudes of what the game is. So what we're trying to create that, I often have to keep in mind of what's that user experience going to be. So while I might use a very stylized piece of art in a print publication, I might want to have a very realistic version for this, or if I got a Facebook game, I might want to even go more stylized if my audience is younger, yada, yada, yada. So when I'm commissioning art, especially as we're moving into the new D&D thing, I actually I commission art thinking about the idea of how it's going to be used in other mediums, whether it's a comic book or a video game or whatever, because we're often trying to think about, you know, what's the differentiation between this creature and that creature? You know, how are the outlines different, so that if I got it into a mob scene in a video game, is there enough of an outline differentiation so that you can really instantly say, oh yeah, there's a gnoll over there, and there's a goblin over there, and there's an orc over there, because especially in a mob situation, you need to be able to identify really quickly so you can change your tactics and change what you're going to do and figure out what, you know, who's got to be up front, who's got to be in the back. So we definitely do think about that. We also try and think about what kind of space they're going to take up. But at the end, we ultimately want to come down to, you know, how much does it really tap into what the ethos of that creature is, because that's really more important sometimes. You know, sometimes I have to bend the rules, or I'll tell the guys, you know, at Cryptic or over at, you know, DDO or whatnot, and say, okay, I know this is how we typically do them, but for your game, it's okay if we sit here and make them a little taller, a little shorter, because we need to create a better experience for the video game versus what we do for the RPG. And so I have to understand that there's always got to be some latitude and some wiggle room to sit here and make for a good user experience versus just always be, yes, this is how the art must be. You know, everybody thinks that's my job. That really isn't my job. My job is to try and make sure that you guys are saying, yeah, that works. That's really cool, and that's how a goblin would act, or that's how it would look, or that's how it, you know, in that user experience.
Right. In our recent experience with Cryptic, they gave us a werewolf boss that was literally 15 feet tall, right? And so when you're looking at it and you're just standing up next to it, right? So that the werewolf is way up here and you know, we're down here, and you think this werewolf is ridiculously oversized, right? It's just huge. Can't believe how big this is. There's no reason for this werewolf to be 15 feet tall. But with the Cryptic engine, and hopefully Jack will be here to show it off a little bit, and I think that we have it in the booth.
Yeah, we do.
Your camera is over your shoulder, right? So it's back here. And so when the camera is back here, that means that you're not really looking from your eyeballs to the thing that you're fighting. You're looking at it from 6 to 10 feet behind you, which means that it looks smaller because it looks like you're 6 feet or 10 feet away, farther away from it. And so in that example, the werewolf was a boss, and the boss kept summoning other little werewolfy and wolfy things to come and attack you while you're trying to take it down. And so Cryptic felt it was very, very necessary to be able to have something that stood out so you knew where the boss was. And so in this case, we played the game, and we thought, you know, the werewolf doesn't look 15 feet tall when you're actually playing the game inside the Cryptic engine. And it makes a lot more sense when it's the boss, and you can focus on that boss easily, target it easily, and fight it easily, rather than having a more normal size and get it lost in terms of the rest of the critters that are fighting you at the same time.
So we do this with scale all the time, and we've had these same conversations over the years on, like, our devils are, you know, supposed to be, you know, 13, 15 feet tall, but we had to make them closer to 19. Otherwise, they don't feel like a boss. So they don't make you feel heroic. And if you run around, you'll notice this is not just in DDO, but it's pretty standard that the NPCs are shorter than you. This makes you feel better about yourself. And so this is satisfying a need about you feeling good about what you're doing, and going up against something that's bigger than you and killing it makes you feel better about yourself as well. And so that's why we have that push for this guy's tough, and we can stat him all we want and make him as big as a rat, and you won't feel like he was that cool of a kill. But if we make him look really menacing by just being larger than you, the same example, if you take down a dragon, you feel pretty cool when you've actually done that. And the biggest sense of that is it's bigger than you, and I took down something more that appears to be more powerful. So we're conveying that message in that digital format that you don't do in pen and paper, because you're looking at things to scale. Like, you know, I'm 6 feet tall as my heroic character, and this thing's 12 feet tall. That's huge. And when you look at that in like the camera, the perspective is that it's not actually that much bigger than you when it's only 12 feet tall. It's actually twice your size if you're inside of the model. but when you're away from it, he just shrinks down. So.
Yeah, that camera angle does a lot of other weird things. For one thing, if you start running normal speed of a human, you would feel like you were just crawling through the game. So normally run speeds are twice, 3 times the speed of a normal human could run. Same deal with jumping. If you could only jump, you know, the current vertical that you have. I know that I have a vertical lower than John's, and John is on crutches. So you would think that you wouldn't be able to jump at all in that. So normally I think that most video games jump the height of the character, right?
Yeah, we're probably, you start out about waist height.
Yeah.
Is your level 1.
Right.
So.
And
How many people here can actually jump to their waist here? He can.
there.
Okay.
Yeah, he has a low waist. You can't tell from here, but it's just. Yeah, let's start talking about how to transfer D&D into a video game. John, what are the primary things that you think you need in order to have a video game that says that it is D&D?
So, you know, actually, Chris Youngs and I had a really long discussion about that quite a while back. Chris Youngs is my R&D counterpart on the R&D side of things, and we had a long conversation about what is this core of D&D. You know, what's that experience that we try and take across? And we know that there's obviously there's the things that you should be able to fight, you should be able to cast magic, you should be. I mean, those are typical. That's pretty obvious, right? But we also realize that there's a lot of core things that, if you look at most video games out there, you'll realize that they lifted a lot of things from D&D. Well, there's health points. Oh, there's hit points. There's armor class. These are all core components that have been part of D&D for almost 40 years now that are very commonplace in video games now. Awesome. We love it. We like to do the same thing. We also know that you'd like to be able to have, be able to build your characters. That's one of the major components. That's one of the big things. If you can't build your character, you can't create your character, it's a really bad D&D experience as far as we're concerned, because that's such a major component that, if everybody, I assume that everybody out here is much like I am. You like to build your characters, you like to take time, spend energy, thinking about that. Is that true? Okay. I was like, am I wrong? So that's one of the core things we like to be able to do. We like to have progressions. You like to be able to level up. You like to be able to get new powers and new abilities. And that's also, we see that as a very core component. So interestingly enough, a lot of the things we know as core experiences for the D&D play experience are things that have been lifted for many, many years already as part of the game playing experience, because they recognize that, oh, hey, these are great experiences. We love to do them, So just those core things that most games already do, and that's why we like to keep doing them too. So but that's what. The other thing we really like to do is we like to encourage team play whenever possible. The head-to-head experience is awesome. If you want to do that, great. Go out and grab yourself any kind of shooter, and you can sit here and go head-to-head with anybody in the world. One of the things we like to encourage as much as possible in our games is a team play experience, whether it's you can grab NPCs and go run and do something, or whether you actually can team up with your friends to go do something. That's a really important component, because that social aspect is really key in a lot of ways. It emulates the idea of I got my 5 friends around a table, we're going and we're going to kick down the door, kill the monster, and go off and have lots of fun.
All right. And Eric, what do you think is the essential ingredients to make a video game feel like a D&D experience?
So there's a couple of things that we try to stay consistent with. Well, the character build, definitely. We touched on that, and that's one of the things that so we tout as the thing we're most proud of. You can multi-class, you can do any number of insane to broken builds that you want, and you've got the familiar 3-5 roll stats, and we've also added an enhancements line, like a benefits line that you can get while you're leveling up to allow you to diversify, add toughness in between levels, so you get a little bit more for hit points and so on. So you can customize your characters. There's a whole community basis to that, which also supports that, keeping it D&D, because it really is about being social. Interestingly enough, it doesn't really mean you have to be social in game. There's a community side to it that you can tap into, and part of the MMO environment is that it is open world, and we've opened up over the years, we've opened up chat to just be general, even whether you're questing, if you're within the region, you can hear chatter from other people and interact with those people. Lots of talk about builds and what does this do, and what do I need if I want to do this particular thing, what are these monsters immune to, and what do I need to be able to, accomplish these quests. That sort of communication is essential. And then the other thing in the gameplay that I love about how we're interpreting the D&D experience is having the DM actually guide you through, even though we're trying to represent visually that you're in a cave and that there's dark corridors and there looks like some sort of hag hut, down in the corner. You can see that, so the DM doesn't have to tell you about it, but the DM can definitely tell you about the the distant sounds, tell you about the smells, and add to that experience that you would normally only get from having the DM describe it to you, because we can't visually represent it. So I think those are important. Also, tips on what to do, sort of subtle hints or maybe foreshadowing for what to do, also an important part of the DM.
So DDO has a dungeon master that tells you what's up with the instance that you're going into, right?
Yeah. So the way to look at it is you get together with your friends and play with us, the dungeon master. We're the ones that have built it out. We're the ones with the box on our side of the computer, and we really do pen and paper the dungeon out, right? We represent it. It's not generated stock quest type of thing of go collect this. We create adventures with a story, and that's part of that D&D experience, I think, too, that you really appreciate. What we don't have, and I think it's a future of gaming thing, is allowing you to actually create your own dungeons, and I think that's just saying that you can be the dungeon master. Now, in the digital realm, that's quite an investment, and it's probably risky and it's expensive with current technology to allow tools that are accessible and statistically maybe 10% of the core audience would actually use them.
I think you're being really generous.
Depends on how easy they are.
That's really good. Let's burrow a little bit further into the difficulty of making D&D into a video game in terms of writing. So in a regular D&D game, the DM is able to fly by the seat of his pants, basically, right? So the party starts out in a dungeon. They go outside of you say, okay, you see a dark dungeon ahead of you. You're there to get the lost treasure, et cetera, and so forth. What do you do? And the players say, oh, well, we leave the dungeon and go over the next mountain and see what's over there, because this dungeon is obviously very boring. So in a video game, you can't plan for that, right? You're pretty much having to drive a character. As sandboxy as your game is, there are still limits to the things that your character can do, and especially with adventure design, you end up doing much more linear experiences. So how do you do adventure design in DDO to make people feel like they have more choices, more abilities, more sandboxy feel than they might actually have?
So there's always that main quest, the thing that gets you the experience in the main chest and the quest reward loot and all those things at the end. So that's the thing that becomes sort of the static, minimal thing to do. Then there's that ability to add optional adventures, things that you can, like you're really enjoying this, you want to keep this experience of this gameplay, these particular monsters, and this storyline. So you have the optional objectives, which you can separately earn your experience in, possibly, usually additional loot. And then the main storyline is also populated with lots of optional quests, like hundreds overall of quests that have a small 3 to 4 part storyline. Over the years, eventually able to reach a point where you do have choices of what you can play. You don't have to play everything just to progress. You know, MMO comes out in the beginning, and you pretty much have the content you need to level to the max level. And the part of supporting the game live is that you populate more experience across those level bands and add the flexibility of what adventures you take. So you have some options to say, I don't really want to play this one, or I don't have a party strong enough for this particular one, or I'm just soloing tonight, so I want to play this one. And then the other thing that we try to do for the accessibility to all that is to add a certain level of variability based on the difficulty level that you choose to take. So if you guys are all pretty hardcore experienced with strong builds and awesome loot from your raids, then you're probably going to want to just stick to the Epic Challenge, which has tougher traps, maybe different monster variants and so on. Or you could play a more casual version of that same adventure, same storyline, but the challenge is reduced. Maybe the monsters are fewer. So there's that diversity in that single dungeon just for that as well.
Cool. One other game design-y kind of video game question. So D&D has many less levels than a normal MMO. Like World of Warcraft is what can level up to 80, 90? 90? Right. Soon with your Pandarian, right? So, but D&D has 30 levels in 4th edition at this point, right? So how do you stretch that out to make it feel like a competing MMO? How do you make that get up to that 20th or 30th level?
Yeah. So the same thing with getting a +1 item in other games that doesn't really mean as much, but in D&D, I mean that's 10% better, right? Because you're dealing on a different scale. So we've given a little bit of a perception of how big those levels are by putting ranks in between. So as you're leveling up your first 20 levels, you're actually going to have 5 milestones in there where you earn an additional achievement or benefit, and that gives you that sense of progression. And if you add that up, it's 90 to 100 levels in comparison.
So you'd subdivide.
We subdivide it, and those experiences are really just as long, compared to the. I mean, you get to level 7 in a typical MMO. That's your first night.
Yeah.
Level 2 in DDO is a pretty good night.
Cool. So I don't have a lot more topics up here for the lectures, and we're getting to a good time to start opening up to the audience. Let's do a quick survey before we start taking questions. So how many of you guys work in technology? Look at that. And how many of you guys actually work in video games? It's like kind of. All right, good. So yeah, one of the things that we find out on our D&D forums is that we have a large amount of people who love to give us free technical advice. So I kind of knew that you guys were probably pretty technically oriented. All right, so let's bring it around. We have microphones in the center, but I think I'm just going to walk around like Phil Donahue. So here.
Thanks. So I play D&D online, and we've played everything from Neverwinter Nights to everything like that. And so I think there's a really good selection of online MMO pieces to fill in that I want to play with my friends. But with mobile gaming and like the release of Baldur's Gate, do you guys have any plans of going back to Pools of Radiance, Eye of the Beholder, any of those old licenses, and kind of making them for mobile for that party-based solo on the go kind of thing?
So I guess I can answer that. The old stuff, especially the gold box games, are difficult for us because they come from TSR, and TSR did all their contracts in, I'm not sure exactly what language, but our lawyers don't speak it. So it's very, very difficult to dig those old games out because of the massive legalese that happened back then. However, that does not mean that we won't be making successors to those games in the future. We do have Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition, as you mentioned, from Beamdog coming out hopefully next month. And then we'll be moving on comparatively after that just to see how successful those things are, right? So I think does that answer your question? Okay.
Well, and let me just jump on a little bit more on that one. I mean, the thing that we recognize, I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, is we understand that there's lots of different play methods. We understand there's lots of different experiences that people like to have. I mean, did anybody here play Tiny Adventurers when we had that on the Facebook way back when? Oh, a couple of people, thank you.
It's like 3 years ago.
Yeah, that was a while back. That was an experiment we did. I was actually part of that team, and we came in, they told us we had 2 weeks to develop this game. Literally, 2 weeks from, hi, you've got 2 weeks to come up with a concept, execute on it, and have it go live. And so that's why it was quite simplistic, but it was a lot of fun. It was a great thing. We loved it while it was up until we took it down. But it showed us that there's whole different types of play experiences out there for different folks. And so one of the things that we have on our big list, once we got our rights back from Atari, we had a big list of things that we want to do in the future. And so a lot of that ties back to different types of play experiences on different mediums, everything from your mobile apps to your iOS to your this to that. So there's a lot of things that we've got coming in the future, but like anything in technology, it takes more than 2 weeks to actually create it and get it out there live. So there's a lot
at least.
Yeah, 3 weeks. Yeah. There's a lot of cool stuff coming. You'll start seeing it in the next year to 2 years. And what we really want to hear from you guys is if you've got brilliant ideas, let me know. Because I'll put it onto the list. We'll take looks at it. We'll see what we can do. But like John was saying, a lot of our older games, we want to touch as much as we can do because there's a lot of cool stuff out there. There's a lot of great games that were part of our history as contracts allow and as finding interested partners. We're going to do as much as we can because we love to bring a lot of that stuff back as much as too. But like you said, we have a lot of restraints around a lot of the older games.
All right. Okay, more questions? Ah, there we go.
John's going to get his workout now.
So I got some friends who are, dragging me back into Magic the Gathering, and I'm trying to remember the rules and all this and get it. And my friend said, "Hey, get this Duel the Planewalkers thing, $10." So I get the game I'm playing. It's like, okay, great. This reminds me of it. Okay, now I know the turn system, and there's these new things that we called something else way back when I originally played it and all that. And it's a really great resource to basically take someone who's never played the game before, and now, I know all the rules. I can go to Friday Night Magic and not make a complete fool of myself. And are there any thoughts about doing something like that for the next version of D&D?
There are thoughts about doing that, yes. But I can't tell you much more than that.
Yeah, the Magic guys I'm not a Magic guy. I'm a D&D guy. The Magic guys, they really like Duels of Planeswalker for Planeswalkers for the on-ramping experience, which you just talked about. And that's what it's for. It's for people to get into Magic and then move on to Magic the Gathering Online or onto the paper game. One of the things that we get pressure from on that side is everybody wants to make Duels of Planeswalker into a replica of the actual pen and paper game, which would have put you in the same spot that you were earlier, which is, oh my God, look how confusing this is, right? I think there's 12,000 cards in Magic now, right? Something like that. You don't count them on a weekly basis.
No, because I'm not a Magic player.
Okay. I'm not either.
My kids are. Does that make me better?
Yeah. So yeah, you're right, and we do want to have that kind of on-ramping experience for not only the D&D game, but for the board games that we produce. We also do Avalon Hill games as well. So all that stuff, we have big plans for the future, but I can't make any promises because every time we make a promise, we run into a wall. Right. So,
yeah. I mean, one of the really important things to talk about. I mean, the Duels of Planeswalker is such a great on-ramping experience for Magic because the play experience for Magic is pretty simple. It's me against you, and so it's a one-on-one situation, and teaching the rules and stuff is pretty straightforward in a lot of ways. I mean, it's a complex game, but it's still pretty straightforward. D&D, trying to equate the D&D to a startup experience is a little more difficult. You know, we've done some stuff in the past through various different means or different mediums and stuff, where it's been somewhat successful but never really good. And so the one thing we wanted to make sure is if we do it, we have a really strong, good experience, because the last thing I want to do is come out there for an experience that turns people off rather than turns people on. And so that's the biggest conversations. Chris and I have had many conversations about this, and Dan's one of my art directors on the digital side. Awesome guy. If you ever get a chance to meet him, I'm going to bring him to the con hopefully next year. Because the guy just lives and breathes D&D just like the rest of the folks on my team. And he just loves video games as well too. But that's his big thing is, you know, how do we teach an experience that makes sense, that becomes a good on-ramping tool, and makes a great user experience too for the guy who, you know, there's a lot of folks, that's all they do is play the Duels to the Planeswalker game. They never even go beyond that because it's such a great experience unto itself, and we need to have that same kind of on-ramping experience for D&D. So I'm not going to do it fast, and I'm not going to do it cheap. I want to do it well. So we'll have one, I just don't know when.
I always recommend to start out as melee. Just simply easier onboarding, a little less to try to understand.
I usually start
One
there,
bar.
and actually I think you do too, John. And
I stay
don't think-
there.
And we both stay there, right? Yeah.
I
So-
like to hit things.
Yeah, it's a much more simpler type of gameplay when you just have to rush up and hope that the healer keeps you alive.
That's right.
All right, okay, cool. So-
I'm a power guy. The bigger the weapon, the better I am.
Yeah, barbarians.
I realize you said that it's difficult to design your own, but I think that that's one of the key differences between the digital format and the paper format.
Yeah.
And I think if you were to release a tool set, even if it was a very, very complicated, low-level tool set, that I think you would have enough people out there generating content that would be interesting to people. I'm not saying that your average user could go in and use these things, but if you think back in the days of MUDs, multi-user
Oh, yeah.
dungeons, I mean, they had developers, they had people that are willing to learn the languages and pieces like that, and I think that would be valuable.
Yeah, we saw that in Neverwinter, you know, in Neverwinter Nights, we saw that we had to use generate content there. It was just, and I love those guys. They were great guys. I loved working with them too, because I was there. That's how I got my break into the video games industry. Is I was working with those guys for Baldur's Gate, and then all the way through Neverwinter's Night. Like you said, making the content is awesome. There's a ton of DMs out there who just love making their own content, and they eat it up and they'll do it all day long, and they will sit here and work really hard to do it. The second side beside the technical channels that you have technical challenges of people be able to make the content, upload the content, other people get in and play it. You also have to have a tool set that here's Jack. You also have to have a tool set that allows people to do it in a way that makes it not an unbearable experience. And that was one of the things Neverwinter suffered from, was the fact that the tool set was kind of unbearable. And so user-generated content is awesome, but you got to have the tools to support it and the community to support it so that it makes it fun too. So it's got to work both ways. So yeah, I agree. Having it is awesome, and that's something that we always like to have whenever it's possible. It's just we have to make sure that it works right. Hi, Jack.
Hi.
I'm supposed to come at 11, right?
Oh, yeah. No, we were starting at 10 with the panel, and then at 11 you get all to yourself. And show
Oh, I
everybody
didn't know.
stuff.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
I misread.
No, but
Sorry, guys.
even just at the right time, because you can talk about how Neverwinter is going to enable people to make their own dungeons.
Yes, own dungeons, own campaign settings, own everything.
We actually planned that just as you asked that question.
Yeah, we've got, our first step was Star Trek Online, where we put user-generated content into it. And now we're kind of building and growing on it. And our goal is for people to be able to create their own campaigns and go ahead and run it. And you don't need to have the technical expertise of a rocket scientist like you did with the previous iterations of Neverwinter UGC. And we're trying to make it so it's pretty darn accessible. And that old gaming group, when 20 years ago they used to play with, you can get together and play online. And in that campaign setting that you knew and loved, you can set it up right there on our servers. Or you can extend the Neverwinter content and link it in. Our goal is really accessibility as much as humanly possible, but it's also the vision is to allow people to recreate those memories of, being at a kitchen table or hanging out in somebody's bedroom rolling dice.
Yeah, I played with the Foundry a little bit.
That's right. We just had the closed beta test, didn't we? Yes.
And yeah, it's a lot better than using the BioWare.
The Aurora engine.
The Aurora engine.
Yeah.
The Aurora engine was one of the better level design tools that came out during that time. Very
In
good for
its day.
scripting and stuff, but it's still like 4 levels of technology more difficult than your normal user could actually use. So, another question over here.
Going back to that, how do you make it so that one user doesn't generate, here's my +5 Oracle Sword dungeon, I walk in.
It's actually, that's easy. Players don't generate weapons. And if we do allow that, it doesn't exit that campaign or adventure. It stays internally consistent. So, exactly. Who cares? If you want to run a Monty Hall campaign, how many of you know what that means anymore? Okay, good. If you want to run a Monty Hall campaign, yeah, but some of the young guns, they have Monty Hall. Who the hell's that? That's fine by us. That's your fun. Heck, Wizards doesn't care. Nobody cares. As long as you're enjoying yourself, that's really the goal of any game. And but as long as it doesn't contaminate others. But right now, I don't think players will be creating weapons, at least at launch. That's something we might add later.
Does it mean like triggers random? At this point, like you can set up a dungeon or whatever, you don't know what's on thing and it's populating chest.
We might allow some levels of control, but essentially yes. So in other words, you want to make sure it's a sword. We will divvy out automatically the appropriate sword for what the players have just accomplished. Every MMO has a reward system working in the background that we don't hand attach, or at least unless you're a madman, we don't hand attach each individual potential reward to each critter, right? There are tables and you attach it. So all critters of this level toughness go to this table. It's pretty easy to set up in the case of UGC.
All right, so by the way, we didn't introduce Jack. This is Jack Emmert. You're the CEO of Cryptic, right?
Indeed, the CEO of Cryptic Studios.
And they're making the Neverwinter MMO,
Yep.
and that's what we're talking about right now. So just in case anybody was...
And you can play it. We're actually rebooting the servers. You can play DDO, and I assume you're from Turbine because you have one. Okay, good. You can play DDO and Neverwinter in the booth, kind of tucked to the side, right across from Drizzt and Guinevere.
Right, question here.
In your user-generated content, are you going to have data points linked back to your online servers for that user content so it could be possibly discoverable by other people outside of your campaigning group that you'd share
sure.
with?
Yeah.
And are you putting in a mechanic in there to where maybe it could be, if it is, say, used by somebody else, that there are remnants or artifacts left over because of that? That would show that somebody was actually in there, that somebody did use it, so that somebody that did create their user content would know specifically that other people do like what they're designing, what they're developing?
Oh yeah, you should play Star Trek for that. There's a full content system, a rating system. We even have, we're planning on some pretty bizarre stuff for Neverwinter. And I have to, I was just talking with the person running the project on that. And inevitably, I swear designers, they come up with the most complicated stuff. But to rewind, we even have a tip jar so that you can tip people in-game currency if you really like what they did to some limits. We might do something like that for Neverwinter. There's a vastly more complicated system that somebody wants to do that I have to say no. But yeah, I mean, it's very important, right? A lot of people create stuff just to create it, but it's pretty darn cool to create something and then become really well known for it. And in Star Trek, there's about 12 to 24 really good creators. And in fact, I think coming up this month, we have spotlights on their content. And who knows, we might absorb that content into the mainstream game. Obviously, depending on what Wizard says, too.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. There, yeah, you are not going to be running your own servers. It all runs on ours.
Okay, so we're running out of time. What I would like to do is ask Eric about Update 15 and the recent Menace of the Underdark update, so that you get some time to talk about DDO.
Sure.
And
So what I just want to say, first of all, what's cooler than Drow? I mean, who here? It's the best thing in D&D, right? Ever since it came out with Vault of the Drow, and this expansion is really badass. So it is almost like a relaunch of the game, and I really, really encourage you guys, check out DDO. It's free to play, and this expansion is a perfect time to jump in. So with that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, we'll be in the booth. We actually have a competition going in there today, but I'll be in there this weekend, and one of the booths will be running the new content. So one of the things that I almost spoke of a little earlier, we're talking about going back and reviving old D&D experiences or campaigns. One of the things that we were able to do that I wouldn't have guessed 5 years ago is go from Eberron and then level up and go to Forgotten Realms. So through some back and forth over probably a year of how do we do this lore appropriately, we managed to open the gates, as we would say, to take characters to epic levels in the Forgotten Realms. So the new expansion is not just expanding the game and the levels, but actually taking it to a new campaign. So after level 20, actually prior to that, in the heroic levels, you can get in and experience the Forgotten Realms, Drow, Lolth experience, and it's in line with the Rise of the Underdark campaign. It's Menace of the Underdark expansion. So we launched that in June, about 15 quests and some large open landscape areas, but 3 large, including the Underdark. One thing I'm really proud of is that we voiced Elminster, so you can hear what he sounds like after all these years.
He's got a really high, squeaky voice.
He's a little.
Hi, how are you?
He's a little. We had a lot of guidance, but we found him. It's actually so Warner Brothers always uses contracted union folk. So we got somebody who's a voice actor out of actually home base is in Dallas, Texas. Brad Venerable.
And no, Elminster does not have a Texas accent.
And he does not have. In fact, a little too close, a little too. Almost too Sean Connery, if you will, but nonetheless really cool. So yeah, so you get to meet Elminster a little bit along the way. He convinces you that we share a common goal, and that's in fighting Lolth and her Schindlerin Drow minions and followers, high priestesses and so on. So we got to do lots of cool monsters we didn't do before. We've got to introduce a lot of new rigs. So one of the challenges, and we're talking about the art side of it,
is spiders.
Yeah, lots of spiders. When you create new monsters, what do they get rigged like, and like how many arms and limbs do they have? So we saw some really cool things that are minions of Lolth. They had like 15 movable limbs on them. So it's like, can we actually afford to do it? Because it's going to take the cost of 3 monsters to do this. So let's get more money and make these really cool. We got a couple, 4-arm monsters in there instead that are equally awesome or menacing. So we shipped that in June, and keeping with the, I think it was G4's MMO spot tagged Turbine, we worked too hard. We just turned out another content update. 2 months later, it launches this next week, and that continues the Forgotten Realms campaign going west of the Cormyr King's Forest.
Cool. So they gave me 2 hours of being able to talk to you guys today. So Jack wanted to talk about Neverwinter, so we're going to give him the next hour. So what we're going to do is let Jack set up his stuff, and then we'll start probably in about 10 minutes. Gives you guys enough time to tweet all of your friends and message them and get them all in here to see what Neverwinter is all going to look like. So we'll start again in about 10 minutes, so 10 after the hour. Thank you.